I'm going to clean up some aluminium terminals. So these bits of aluminium I'm using here are very specific to my build, but you can use this same method of cleaning for any aluminium that you need to use in an electrical circuit. So what I'm doing, I've got these, I've pulled these out of the battery module, and I just need to clean them up before I put them back in again. So they've had this grease on them before. I'll show you what this grease is. That's this particular one. It's designed to, put it over there, it's designed to stop the aluminium corroding. So with aluminium, it gets a surface layer of aluminium oxide when it reacts with the air, and that isn't good at conducting electricity, so you need to clean that off. It's clear, you can't see it, and it forms reasonably quickly. So every time we expose these to the air, we need to clean that back off again before we put the connections back together again. So what I'm going to do first is clean off that previous grease by using some methylated spirits and a rag. Now for me, I'm most interested in the top and bottom. That's where the main current goes through, but I also have connections on the inside, so I'll do the inside a bit as well. When I first did these, I used a chemical cleaner, like wax and grease remover, to remove the grease that was put onto the aluminium when it was first made. But because I've cleaned this up previously, I'm not bothering doing that step. And so what I've got here is one of these scouring pads. Just get one without soap on it, and I've cut them up into little pieces so that I can use them bit by bit. And so yeah, have a good clean on there. And really, I don't know how much to do it. I can see it going a different colour, and so I'll just do it until the whole surface is a different colour. Now, like I said, I'm most interested in the top and bottom, but I will do the insides as well around the bolt holes. Notice I've got gloves on to stop fingerprints, something like that. Now I've got Brillo dust all over it, so I'll run over it with the rag again, different rag, also with metho, polish it up. And so once this is clean like so, you can see it goes quite black on there when you give it a polish. Once I've cleaned this up, it's in theory got no aluminium oxide on the surface, but I'm not going to assemble it immediately because I want to do all of these before I do. So what I'm going to do is put a coating of this grease on it. And so this grease, you put some on like so. I'm going to put it reasonably thickly. Put it on reasonably thickly because I'm not going to use this for a little while. I'm not going to assemble this for a little while. I'm probably going to assemble it tomorrow. So just a little bit around each hole in my case, but over the entire top and bottom surface. And put that over there with the others, and that can sit there till tomorrow. So tomorrow, to use this, what I'll do is I'll get a clean rag and I'll wipe that off, and it'll leave a tiny amount on there. So the grease isn't actually conductive, and so if you have too much on there, then you're stopping the electricity going through, which is not really what you want. It defeats the purpose of it. And so what you want is a very, very thin layer. So wipe it off as if you're trying to get rid of it. It'll leave the tiniest of layer, which when you clamp it, that'll squeeze out and go around the edges of the joint and stop the air getting in around the edges. So I'm going to do the cells as well, because one terminal on the cells, the positive one by the look of it, is aluminium. The negative one's copper. On these cells, the copper has been tinned. So that doesn't need to be cleaned off. Tin is really good. All I'll do when I come to assemble it is give that a quick wipe down with metho. With the aluminium though, that does need to be cleaned up in the same way as the aluminium terminals I had before. So the way that I've come up with for doing this is very similar. I've just got that on a surface there. I'll clean it off with metho first. Clean the grease off. A little bit of Brillo. A bit of a layer of grease to keep it clean. Until I go to assemble it. Put that back in the pack and go for the next one. I'm just about ready to start putting this module together again. I've done a couple of modifications. I've welded those nuts on the bottom, which means I don't need nuts inside there, which was the cause of my problem with the pierced cell. And I've also replaced the metal sides. So these aluminium sides, I had previously put contact over the inside so they're not conductive, but they're still sort of sharp on the edges and so on. And in particular along this edge, which goes down here. And the idea is you line the cells up so that they're perfectly straight up and down, perfectly square with each other. I'm hoping that I don't need it. So I've gone with this Perspex, which doesn't have the fold. I could put a fold on, but I don't have a folding machine here now. I'd have to do that elsewhere. But I'll see how I go without a fold. So I've got this ruler here and I can line them up with that against the table there. It sits square on the bottom of the table. We'll see how that goes. If it doesn't work, I might have to put one of these metal sides in again. So with these cells, since I found out that the mylar, well, what would I say? So what I've heard is that the mylar that insulates these cells can break down over time as the cells age, particularly if there's a little bit of moisture around, which there shouldn't be in the car, but anyway, to give an extra level of insulation, I've decided to put a layer in between each cell. And what I've gone for is got this Teflon mat, sort of a woven Teflon mat hanging around. So I've cut up pieces of that. They're not quite long enough, which means I've put a bit of Kaptan tape along the edge, which both gives me the length, but it also means it sits there. It holds it in place. So I've put that on. I'll put that on top of each cell. I've done the first two. I'll do it as I go. So this goes in here like this. Now one thing with these Perspex sides, they're not as thin as the aluminium. So I'm hoping that the cells will fit in between it. It seems like it will. That's one reason why I've got the top on at the moment, is so that I can see that the rods are parallel. My cells are 4 in parallel, which means I've just done my first group of 4 in parallel at the moment, up to my 4th one, and I'll put a divider here as well with the battery heating module. So I'll put a battery heating module on this. I'll put this on top to just soak up some of the squish. So here's my battery heater. This green stuff, by the way, it's not actually the Brillo pad. I'll show you the Brillo pad next to it. Brillo pad is abrasive. This stuff is not. It's just sort of a felt type thing. And the idea is it can squash a little bit. Which means as we compress the whole thing down, this will take a little bit of the compression, and I'm using it over the battery warmers here, because the battery warmers they've got these edges, and I'm not particularly happy with having them sandwiched in between the cells as is. So this will just give a little bit extra thickness, a little bit extra squash. The other thing to do on cell number 4 is to put this BMS connector in. Goes like that. Now we're on the negative here, the BMS board. Clamps on the negative, has this wire to go through to the positive end, so it comes on this side of the cells. Now this cell is part of the next 4 in parallel, so they were negative positive, this one's positive negative. Okay, they're all in there. They're all around the right way, I've checked them. Now, it's not simple, they don't automatically go straight, so I've been using the square, make sure they're straight that way and not twisted. And I think I'm ready to compress these now. So what I want to do is compress them first and then do the connections once they're all in place. So to do that, I put in a ruler there, and what I want to do is compress the top of this plate to the same level in all 4. So those are all about the same height, and so what I'm going to do now is go 1 full turn, 1 full turn, and keep on going like that. Now I don't know how tight they should be. So I just go to it, feels tight. I did look up a specification of how tight they're meant to be, and it seemed ridiculously tight. And so I sort of decide, well, I'm not probably going to go that tight, it probably doesn't really matter. I've got the cells all in the pile here in the module, and I'm ready to start connecting up the little end connecting bits. I think I might start with this top one. So I'm on the positive terminal of this top lot of cells, which means that's an aluminium terminal, and I've put the grease on there to stop it oxidizing. And so here's a aluminium thing that I'm connecting to as well. And so yeah, I'll just wipe the grease off. So the grease is there because I cleaned it up and got all the aluminium oxide off it before. And now I'm just wiping it off. Now I've wiped it off, but it's not completely wiped off. And so there should be enough there to keep protecting it from the aluminium oxide until I clamp the cells in there, clamp the tabs in there, and then that'll squish out the last little bit of the grease and make a good contact, is the theory. What I've done here is I've put this little bracket on here, so that will, when I push these two, it'll clamp up in that direction. So the bottom two tabs of the bottom two cells are going to go in there. I have 4 cells in this group. It's simpler on the ends. Down here I'll have 8. This is where the Teflon comes in handy. The bolt's sitting on top of the next cell, but it's not contacting because it's sitting on the Teflon. Here's the spring clamp that I'm putting on here. So you can see where is one? They start out like that, like that, and then they compress up as I do up the bolts. Now I've done this one so it is straight. See this one, which is going the other direction, I've clamped down. It's not quite straight yet. So you want to do them straight and no more than straight. If you tighten them up too much, then they'll start to bend in the other direction as well. But yeah, when they're straight, they're putting up a good amount of force over the entire surface area. Now the other thing, don't know if you can see under here, the 2 tabs of the cell are both underneath the clamp. So with these, this top one isn't so bad because the 2 cells are quite close together, but down further when I've got 8 in them, there'll be different lengths in this direction, and so sometimes they might not all line up properly. So you need to check to make sure they are lined up. You can push this whole thing up and down, and so if I push it up a bit, then they line up slightly differently. So the next lot has positive and negative ends. The negative end is plain, or it's tinned copper, and so I'll just give it a clean with some metho on a rag. This is how the BMS module goes on. So we've got a bolt, then a flat washer, another flat washer underneath. That's so that the bottom of the BMS board doesn't touch the curved spring there, and then through into here. So these bits have these aluminium pieces. I attempted to thread them, and so some of them still have some thread. There's no thread in this hole, but there is in the top hole, and which makes them easy to put in. There's not enough thread to keep them on there under the tension that they need to be in, so I've been putting nuts and washers underneath there as well. So underneath there I'll put a spring washer and a nut. The BMS has 2 communications sockets there, and that one there is for the power, 2 lines, one for the power and one for the voltage sense, which goes into this here. So it all sits in place up here. I can slide that over those two tabs. So we've got 3 tabs on the bottom of this one, 2 on top. It sits in there like that. This is where we're at. We've got our first one up the top. So this is the positive of the entire module. And so it doesn't have a BMS on it. The BMS only goes on the negative end of a cell. So we've got our 2 clamps at top and bottom. That's the output there once we take that tape off. So then we've got our bit of Teflon. And then the next one, we've got our bolts into the BMS, clamp underneath the BMS, and another clamp at the bottom. Positive of the BMS onto there. So this is the positive of the BMS that's on the other side, and this is the negative of this BMS. Now, talking before about clamping these, the middle one, because there's no bow in it, it's straight, it gets a bit of a bow, especially at the front here. Now, what I'm hoping is at the back, it doesn't have that bow in there, and that's where the clamping onto the cell tabs is the best. I've got, what have I got? 3 cells in there, so there's 8 cells here. I've got 2 at the top, 3 in the middle, and 3 at the bottom. So I've connected up the BMS modules boards on top of each of these. So I've got 3 on this side, 3 on the other side. It's getting its positive from there, it's negative from there, and we need to connect the communications. And so this comes from the other side. So I'm going to say it goes out from the other side and into here. And then it comes out from this one and into the next one. Out of this one. Into the next one. Now this is all connected, I better see if I've got the right voltage. So we start out with negative down the bottom, and then we should have about 4 volts there, and about 8 volts there. What's next? 12, 16, 20, and 24. Good. So that'll be 24 between those two, but I might not be able to get at them. Oh yeah, good. So here's the one I've just rebuilt next to its siblings. So the newly rebuilt one has the perspex on the side. How you can tell it. I've tested the voltages. What have I tested? I tested the resistance on the heater That was 18 ohms, which is about what it's meant to be. And I haven't actually tested the BMS yet, but I might do that later. Now I've got the next module to do over here. So I need to pull this one apart. Now the reason we're looking at this one is because, so right in there, don't know if you can see it or not, two of the modules have yellow goo, looks like underneath the clear wrapping of the cell. So I need to pull those apart. So the history of this is that I saw this about a year ago for the first time on one of the cells and didn't do anything about it. I looked at it, decided I couldn't get it out, and I'd leave it until I watched it, and after a little while it was a bit bigger, and now a year later the second cell has started to do the same thing. So there's something funny going on here. I've measured voltage between the between here, the cell ends, and this metal side here. I can't see any voltage because I thought maybe the ends here were touching on it, but who knows? I can't measure anything, but who knows why it's actually happened. But I've got some cells, I'll replace those two. To pull it all apart again, just like the other one.